We got to do a better job as coaches, got to do a better job as players, got to do a better job as an organization.
This week on The Beat, we get Mike's breakdown of Saturday's nail-biter against Bama. And we'll look ahead to the Deep South's oldest rivalry.
We got to go get ready for Auburn, who's a really, really good football team. Whatever number of wins we've had prior to this one, we did the same thing we're going to do today. And I really believe in that process.
Trust the process. Let's roll.
Giving you the insider takes and the big picture view on the Dogs. This is On the Beat, presented by Ingles with DawgNation insider Mike Griffith and Cody Chaffins.
Welcome into On the Beat. Cody Chaffins and Mike Griffith here. And Mike, it's been a long, long time since you've done one of these shows after a regular season loss. Feels weird, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, and it feels just as odd now to be talking about -3 in turnover differentials. I think we were back then when South Carolina won a game between the hedges, and quite an upset that was. This one obviously wasn't that big of a upset. I mean, by the time the game kicked off, the odds were pretty close. A lot of people sensed Alabama momentum, and it proved true. I mean, Jalen Milroe was fantastic. He pitched a perfect game. You know, like Kirby said, when that guy's able to throw the ball as effectively and efficiently and accurately, and he was on his game, then you got real problems because Milroe can run. And Kirby compared him to Bo Jackson, which I thought maybe was a little much, but you get his point. You know, probably the best runner in that game was Jalen Milroe.
And he was just oozing confidence. We're going to get a lot more into the Alabama game coming up in this show. We'll talk about who's hot and who's cold. We'll also have our boots on the ground, share some of the stuff I saw while I was down on the sidelines for Georgia, Alabama. But I do kind of want to start and maybe mixing things up a little bit from what we talked about before. But we heard Kirby Smart right there talk about, he was asked today in his press conference, you know what, you haven't done a press conference after a regular season loss. You guys haven't done this in a long time. How do you feel like you don't let Alabama beat you twice? And that's the ultimate fear, right, for Georgia fans. So what is it about Kirby Smart? He said, we kind of do what we do. How is that process going to make Georgia not carry this over into Auburn week?
Well, I mean, this is part of the process. I mean, resilience and handling adversity is baked in every single day. I mean, the coaches create adversity for these guys with those early morning runs and, that extra wind sprint or that extra drill that you're going to have to do. So it's all about creating adversity for athletes and then watching them build up and overcome, right? So these guys have been trained in getting knocked down and picking themselves back up. Now it's a little different because most of those challenges happen behind the practice gates. And right now everybody's seeing it. Everybody's watching that the Georgia football program has been taken down a notch, that Kalen DeBoer and Alabama were able to prevail in that game. Now, it's amazing to me. It comes down to one jump ball. And if the Georgia guy comes down with it, Colby Young, then Kirby Smart's a great coach who's conquered Alabama, right? But instead, Kalen DeBoer is a genius. But, it's just so funny how if one play turns the game, how different the fallout would be. It was an amazing comeback. It was an amazing football game.
Yeah, you talked about kind of the little things from this football game. I was on the sideline during the game, and it just felt like the world was imploding, right, for Georgia. And Carson Beck and the interceptions kept happening, and they just couldn't get anything going. And meanwhile, Jalen Milroe's, running all in circles around everybody. But I went back, because what I have to do is I can't get much context. You don't get a lot of replays when you're on the sideline. So I had to go back and watch the game. And when I watched the game, I actually didn't feel as bad about things as I had just sitting on the sideline and kind of watching it all unfold. And you're right, it really does come down to some very minor things that would have just changed the course of the game. Kirby Smart in his post-game press conference talked about, a 3rd and 7 on the opening drive, then they jump off sides, it becomes a 3rd and 2, and then they're able to get it. And, a lot of those little things really kind of added up in this game.
Yeah, they really did. There were some key plays. I think back to the first drive when Carson Beck looked like he threw a perfect deep ball to Arian Smith, and it just went through or off his fingertips there. And you think to yourself, man, if George is able to hit that 48-year-old play, how much different could the momentum have been? If they answer Alabama's opening touchdown, right, then I think you're looking at a completely different game. But when you miss on a shot play like that, or conversely later in the game, Ryan Williams makes this juggling catch. Could he do that, 5 times out of 10? So there were a few of those momentum plays, and Georgia just missed, and it looked like Alabama was able to hit on them.
Yeah, you look at those moments like Kristen Miller breaks through and he's wide open. They've schemed that up, right? There were linebackers doing what they had to do to get that man open one-on-one with the quarterback. You talk about Arian Smith. They schemed that up where he has had the ball hit his hands. So at what point, during the game, again, I was like, the coaching did not have them ready. And there's, Kirby Smart, put a little bit of blame on himself. But when you get in the moment, you just got to make the plays, right?
Well, and Kirby talked specifically about not being ready for Milroe to run out of a 5 wide. I mean, he was very transparent. I mean, he'll tell you when he did something wrong too, and there was a lot of that. There's 6 or 7 things, and again, when you're playing Alabama, it seems like Alabama, obviously they played Georgia really well, and they were ready to execute. And those little things, those mistakes that Georgia made, I don't know, Cody, if there's ever been a team in history that's had -3 on the turnover ratio, fallen behind 28-0, and still won. But we were sitting there watching Georgia with a chance to win when it played probably its worst half of football under Kirby since his first year.
Yeah, and so let's move on to talk about the comeback because it was quite amazing.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of folks will, Kirby Smart kind of couched a lot of it, right, by saying, hey, we had 4 downs to work with. You can't really judge a whole lot out of that. And people, after a game, after a plane crash, they'll say, why don't they build the whole plane out of the black box? It survived. Why don't they just – you can't do that, right? And same thing with the football game. You're not going to play wide open. Maybe Alabama took their foot off the gas a little bit, but you're forced to throw the ball. It's just not – that's not the way a game is going to unfold. So you might say, can you take anything away from that? But for me – looking at Carson Beck, who is a guy who, admittedly was nervous at the beginning of the Clemson game, told us that he was a little bit nervous to start that game. He's got to have his confidence have been rocked over the last few weeks. I think for him to have the performance he had in the second half, even if he knows that, maybe Alabama had to play differently or whatever, just to see the ball go through the hoop a little bit has got to be a confidence builder for him. Same thing for Arian Smith, who, like we've said, missed on early, but then he comes down with a huge catch late in that game and comes down with a touchdown as well. So I feel like for me, they can build a little confidence. You can take stuff away from that second half.
Well, you do, and obviously every snap these guys get better, but more than anything, it's about that camaraderie. And that's what it's what you want to see when you're a coach. Your team's facing adversity. It's obviously tough. You're down 30-7. A lot of people pretty much declared Georgia dead. Some Georgia fans left, not a lot, but I heard a few did. And lo and behold, Georgia stays in the fight. And they have that one drive, Cody, where they converted 3 4th downs. And, if you're going to get on Carson because of some of the bad throws that he made or fumbling the ball, he also converted 5 4th downs. And that takes poise and execution. So Carson Beck showed you that big league arm. He showed you who and what he was. He just wasn't consistent with it. And as Kirby said, catastrophic mistakes, right? A turnover inside the red zone on a play where maybe someone didn't hear the audible because of the crowd noise, or, Carson trying to make something out of nothing, scrambling, and, the guy makes a good play, knocks the ball out of his hands. Those 2 plays right there. And again, we're talking about a 1-score game here. So it's not like, oh boy, Alabama was just that much better than Georgia. But I think Alabama played that much better of a game than Georgia, and they still only won by a touchdown. So, to me, I think we can see Georgia's ceiling. We can also see the growing pains. And you've seen a pretty good schedule. Look at some of the other teams' schedule and who they played or who they haven't played. So I think it'll be a tested Georgia team. It'll be a hungry Auburn team. I think it makes for a really good weekend.
Yeah, you got Auburn who, talk about turnovers. That is the Auburn Tigers in 2024, whether it's either quarterback turning the ball over a whole lot, putting the ball on the ground some as well. Peyton Thorne, the quarterback who, threw 6 interceptions so far this year, threw another one against Oklahoma last week. They've lost consecutive weeks, Arkansas and Oklahoma. But at the same time, that's the same Peyton Thorne who, oh, by the way, ran for 92 yards on Georgia last year. Georgia's going to get another chance to prove they can stop a running quarterback this week.
Yeah, and I think Kirby's going to be ready for it. Last year, I don't think the linebacker situation maybe was as settled as now. I feel like the linebackers Georgia has right now are pretty assignment sound and pretty reliable. I think this will obviously be a game for Georgia to build momentum again, get it going in the right direction. I mean, Auburn will come in and fight, and Hugh Freeze's teams, have that potential, that upset potential. But at the same time, just knowing the resolve and the resiliency of what Georgia football has become under Kirby Smart, I mean, you've just got to know what you're going to see on the field. It wouldn't matter who they were playing. You're not going to have, I don't think, two really bad weekends of execution like that in a row.
Yeah, I'm ready to see this Georgia team flex a little bit. We haven't really seen them flex on somebody, maybe Tennessee Tech, but that one doesn't really count. How about a Power 5 team or an SEC team? Go out there, flex your muscles. Let's not have a heartbreak for Georgia or a heartache for Georgia fans, being nervous all night.
Well, Kirby knows how to build a football team, Cody, and he'll get these guys fired up. And again, he saw them pull together in an embarrassing situation down 30-7. There's a lot of ways a locker room can go when everything gets sideways. But the Georgia guys continue to fight, and they gave themselves a chance to win. That's pretty miraculous. A lot of teams, I think, don't get to that point because they don't give themselves a chance when you get down that much. The morale gets busted or the belief goes out the window. But that's just not how Kirby's built this program. So, I think that fight you saw demonstrates that this team does have it in them to make a run. I mean, they were willing to dig and get gritty on the road in a really tough situation. So, maybe now the schedule lightens up a little bit for a couple of weeks, but it's not going to be long. They're going to be back in the fire again.
Yeah, it'll be at Texas before we know it. But, yeah, a chance to kind of regroup and get things together over the next couple weeks. Talk about Kirby Smart and the way he coaches his team. We're going to have a little more on that as I share my boots on the ground coming up in our next segment. But for right now, you are watching On the Beat, presented by Ingalls.
So, you going to play this week?
You gonna play this week?
You going to play this week?
You gonna play this week?
You going to play this
You
week?
gonna play this week? You gonna play this week?
You going to play this week?
You gonna play this week?
And welcome to the Ingalls Game of the Week as the Warhorses square off against the rival.
He's going in.
He's going in. Go, baby!
Ingalls, we're with you every step of the way.
We are back. It's On the Beat, presented by Ingalls. And Ingalls, Mike, you can speak to this, has stuck by you for a long time on this show. We're thinking about Ingalls based in Western North Carolina, all the folks up there affected by Helene this week.
Yeah, obviously Ingalls has been with us through it all, and I know they're going to serve their customers. I know they're going to put their best foot forward, obviously some difficult times. And yeah, we here at DawgNation are thinking of those folks.
All right, it is time for Boots on the Ground. So it's a segment where I get to share some things that I see. I get the chance to shoot all these games from the sidelines, and I like to kind of show some things that maybe the TV broadcast didn't show. If you're in the stadium, maybe you could see it. But we'll start with something that we saw, Mykel Williams. We all saw him out on the field. We know he's been out for the last couple of weeks dealing with an ankle injury. But Kirby Smart talked about it after the game. Mykel was not going to miss this game. He had a bunch of family and friends in the stands. His mom lives pretty close to Alabama, so he was toughing through things. I watched him pregame. I watched him during the game, and watch him here just kind of limping. He was out there doing the best he could. He was clearly not 100%, but he was toughing through things, Mike.
Yeah, you got to like that. And, Mykel, one of those team leaders and clearly a force. When he's 100%, he's just such a disruptor and wrecking ball in there, and not having him at 100%, that's a letdown. You were hoping you'd get him back, but the way these injuries work, there's no magic formula. There's no reset button like there's in the computer game. It just takes time. And, this guy's been going through all the rehab and doing everything he's supposed to. Just hope he gets right soon.
Preseason, and people talking about him a first-round pick, and, he's one of those guys, hey, he could be a prima donna and say, I'm not going to go out there till I'm ready, right? You're not going to ruin my future by making me go play, in a game I don't want to play in. But Kirby Smart said, this is a resume builder for the NFL. Those pro scouts are going to look at that. This guy plays for his teammates and toughs through things. He's not just going to sit out and, opt out, of a game like this.
Well, again, that's the culture that Kirby's built in that locker room, where these players play for one another and accountable to one another. We saw Jalen Carter, a couple years ago, same thing. I mean, here's a guy that, projected in the first half of the first round with all this generational money. And not only does he come back, but he's logging 47, 53 snaps, which was amazing and a real key to that 2022 championship season. So when you see guys like Mykel coming back, trying to play through things, that's part of a championship culture. So great footage there showing everybody just how committed he is to getting back.
And we'll stick with the injury front for the next thing. We have boots on the ground. Before the game, I was standing there sidelines and got to watch Jordan Hall, who was, Kirby had called questionable throughout the week. He got out there and he tried it. He was running with the trainers. Ron Corson came over and talked to him. How do you feel? What's it looking like? And he just couldn't go. You kind of see him wincing at some points as he was out there, but he's somebody they definitely could have used and look forward to having him back. But there's an update for all those Georgia fans wondering what's going on with him. There's some video there of him warming up.
Yeah, pretty rare footage. We don't usually get to see that. And, good to see that Jordan is running and trying to come back from two really difficult injuries there. And again, that's one of the things. Georgia's going to protect these guys. They're not going to rush him back. Michael obviously was not at risk for further injury, not 100% yet. Jordan, however, different story.
All right, and you just talked about Kirby Smart and how he's built his program. It's a piece of video that if you follow me on Twitter or you follow DawgNation on our YouTube channel, which we always urge you to do, go ahead. You've already seen this video, but Kirby Smart, as the team's coming off the field, made it a point to find each and every guy, and a lot of guys on the defense, a lot of guys who struggled throughout the night. The next person you'll see is Julian Humphrey. He grabbed a towel off of his head and, tried to get in his ear. There's the freshman KJ Bolden as he was coming off. He knows this is not the end for these guys. This is one loss. There's a long season to go. So as bad as they're feeling, he felt it important to thank them for the job they did that day and putting it on the line for the G.
Well, that's coaching, and Kirby knows his players better than anybody in the country. You see Jeff Sentell get some shot there, working hard for DawgNation in that top shot. Kirby knows his guys, and you got to know what buttons to push, and his players did give a game effort. And to be fair, Kirby did put some blame on the coaching staff. So I don't think he blamed those players. I think he felt like his coaches could have done a better job with the game plan. And, and I think he wanted to assure these guys that, he took note of their effort. Because, again, a lot of times when these games get out of hand, they can get ugly, especially in today's, as you were saying, prima donna NIL days. But this told you a lot about the Georgia locker room, and I do think it's something to build on. And I do think the fact that Carson was able to score those points was important, albeit with fourth downs, but still, now this is a team that's confident they can execute on fourth downs in clutch situations.
And this is the first step in not letting Alabama beat you twice, right? And there were some folks on, that I had heard from online that said, oh, that's softy stuff. We don't want to see that. If you for 1 second think that Kirby Smart is soft, you got another thing coming.
Well, there's no doubt about it. I mean, he's going to be on them at practice again, challenging them, but that wasn't the time for it. And it's really hard to, get on guys on the sideline during the game. I mean, the hay's in the barn, and, now it's a technical game, and now it's about getting it right as much as it is anything. So, again, Kirby knows his players. He knows how to handle them. He knows how to mold. He's been doing it a long time. Again, he's the same coach that he was before Colby Young didn't come down with a jump ball. If Colby Young comes down with it, and everybody goes, oh, Kirby Smart now 2-6, and a guy doesn't come down with it, and oh my gosh, he'll never beat Alabama. So again, same Kirby, same Georgia, difficult schedule, ran into a red hot Jalen Milroe. I'll be honest, if there's another guy playing better than Jalen Milroe in college football, I haven't seen him.
He was so good on Saturday.
He was so good.
One of the things that Georgia fans after the game, everybody airs their grievances, right? We all we all have all the answers, and we know exactly what everybody's doing wrong. One thing Georgia fans were saying a lot, again, where's Nate Frazier? We saw him so clutch against Clemson, came in, really provided a spark. We hadn't seen a ton of him. Got hurt against Tennessee Tech. We haven't seen very much of him since that point. Well, if we're going to have boots on the ground, we did have some video. Here is Nate Frazier. It looked like he was just fine. For me, is he the fourth best running back on this team? Cash Jones, Branson Robinson got some play behind Trevor Etienne. I think there's no doubt he's taken away, snaps from Trevor Etienne, the way Etienne has played this year. But great question for Georgia fans. Where is Nate Frazier?
Yeah, I mean, you want to see the best players on the team, most explosive players get the ball in their hands. But when you end up in a situation like Georgia did when you're passing, I don't know if the pass protection and the routes are Nate's strength right now, right? In fact, you only saw Etienne, get 12 carries, and I thought that would be a much bigger part of the game, plan to, get him in space and get him more touches. But, it's hard for Etienne to get touches, much less Frazier when you're falling behind, 21-0 in the first quarter.
Yeah, and Kirby Smart was asked about this on Monday, where is Nate Frazier? And he had nothing but good things to say about Frazier. You couldn't even read in like he's not picking things up. No, there was none of that. He only had good things to say. So we'll see. And again, part of it is we've played these really tight games. There hasn't been those fourth quarters when we would used to see Nick Chubb as a freshman or DeAndre Swift get a few more carries when he was just a freshman. They're just playing these. It's a really tough, tight games down to the end. You're going to turn to some of the guys that you trust there, some upperclassmen as well. All right, that is our boots on the ground. But if we're going to be here, we got to be here. Let's do Mike's 30,000-foot view. All right, Mike, all eyes were on Georgia, Alabama, but there's a lot going on around the SEC on Saturday.
Yeah, a lot earlier in the day, a lot of Georgia fans were watching Brock Vandagriff and Jamon Dumas-Johnson go into Ole Miss. I believe they were more than a 2-touchdown underdog and knock off Ole Miss. And everybody all of a sudden is going, wow, Kentucky's pretty good. And somewhere Kirby's nodding going, yeah, I told you guys that. Kentucky, man, really hard to run the ball, make a team one-dimensional. Really gritty performance from Brock Vandagriff on the road. Ole Miss misses a field goal. I mean, this is how upsets happen, although I'm not sure how much of an upset it is. Suddenly Kentucky, right? I mean, what do they have left this season and who do they have left to play? It's interesting to see how this 12-team playoff gets so many teams' life. And Kentucky being one of those teams. Big game this weekend for Florida's coach, Billy Napier. UCF comes in. That's a pick'em game. You got to think Gator fans believe that's a game they should win. And I guess the question I have is, could you really fire Billy Napier midseason? I don't know how those buyout numbers work, but I'm sure there's some math behind it. And who would you have ready? So I know it's a frustrating time for Florida fans. It's a big time for Florida. Playing UCF, you never want to lose to an in-state school. Ole Miss tries to regain their momentum at South Carolina. Cody, I don't know what to make of South Carolina. I mean, are you on board with the Gamecocks? I mean, Ole Miss, to me, this might be one of the bigger toss-ups I've seen of the year.
Yeah, Ole Miss, they don't call them Ole Make, right? So Ole Miss doing what they putting up 100 points, and we talked about it in week one. These teams putting up all these points on everybody. Boy, they peacocking a little bit, and they were humbled pretty quickly this week. So yeah, South Carolina, hey, they beat Kentucky, right? They look great against Kentucky. If they can get after them, and maybe Kentucky, Mark Stoops always seems to have the blueprint, right, to figure teams out, but maybe he set that out there, and the South Carolina can follow suit.
Yeah, no doubt. I think Vandagriff's a big factor for them. I think having that leadership has been big for Kentucky, and I remember talking to the Purdue head coach in the offseason about a few Georgia transfers, and he said, man, love having these guys. It's like Christmas came early. Everybody follows their lead in the locker room. Everybody knows they've been there and done that. So I absolutely think, Vandagriff and Jamon Dumas-Johnson have really helped change that culture. Two, really key leaders from Georgia go up there, and, the Kentucky guys just feed off of that. Tennessee at Arkansas is the game I'll be watching. Tough loss for Sam Pittman and the Hogs against A&M, but a chance to come home, and wouldn't that be a big upset? And then Missouri at Texas A&M. What do we think of Missouri? They've had a week off. They barely beat Vanderbilt in overtime. A&M coming off a tough game. I mean, you can kind of see how this is shuffling around and who needs to do what in order to still get in the playoff. Like, I look at Georgia and I say, okay, you got to take 2 out of 3 from Tennessee, Ole Miss, and Texas. And to me, that's the formula, right? But first, you better beat Auburn, and win the games you're supposed to win.
Yes, I love it when we get to this point of the year because we spent all offseason, we knew what was going to happen, but nothing's going to be chalk. It's still the SEC. It's still crazy, which is why, there is a report out about on ESPN, the Big Ten and SEC, talking about a scheduling partnership moving forward. It's supposed to be a meeting of athletic directors and, of course, the conference commissioners in Nashville next week. But part of that depends on an 8 or 9 game schedule for the SEC, which they still haven't decided. But if we're already seeing all this chaos in the SEC now, imagine one more game on top of all of that.
It'd be crazy, but one more conference game, and obviously it would make the television package more valuable because it'd be one more really competitive game. Conversely, the SEC wants to make sure, if they're slugging it out, with really maybe 6 or 7 teams that are in the top 15 in the nation, are they still going to get the same number of slots, or are you going to look down your nose at a 3-loss SEC team and maybe take a 1-loss team from a much lesser conference? So I think, Cody, that's where you get into them wanting those guaranteed slots, saying, all right, well, if you'll tell us our top 4 teams will get in, maybe then it'll make more sense for the SEC to go to a 9-game conference schedule, because as things are right now, they look like they're doing just fine, and their schedule strength still measures up.
Yeah, something to keep our eye on in the next couple of weeks as well, and it should be really, really interesting stuff. We got one more segment to come here on The Beat. We're going to do our Who's Hot and Who's Cold, presented by Anytime Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing. Stay with us.
I'm so glad you're here.
Let's take a look.
Anytime can handle all your HVAC and plumbing needs, providing top quality service for a reasonable price.
All fixed now.
Can we call you again?
Yes, anytime. Any day? Yes, anytime.
But for the heat?
Yes, anytime. For the toilet? Yes, anytime. Anytime you have a problem, just call.
Anytime Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing. Large enough to handle your HVAC needs, but small enough to care.
We are back on The Beat. All right, Mike, it's time for Who's Hot and Who's Cold. Let's start with Who's Hot.
Well, I don't know how it couldn't be Jalen Milroe. I mean, you got to give this guy a lot of credit. He played really good football. He was very accurate. He ran the ball when he had to. He made timely plays. He's got a great receiver in Ryan Williams to go to. He throws the deep ball extremely well. I mean, Jalen Milroe is making a lot of money for himself right now as an NFL prospect, and I think he's clearly the Heisman Trophy front runner. Sometimes the other guy just plays better, and that was Jalen Milroe on Saturday night, and he was definitely the difference in the game.
Yeah, I'll stick with that. Kind of Ryan Williams was so hot on Saturday as well. I came in, you heard all the things people had said. Oh, he's only 17 and all the. I just wanted that to be just too much hype. The dude lived up to every bit of it. Just the way he contorted his body on the final touchdown. You got to tip your hat to the guy. He was really hot.
But Cody, I'll tell you, you got to tip your cap to Dylan Bell because of the way he broke out. I mean, Dylan needed that game. We talked about that. He hadn't even had 100 yards total through the first 3 games, and I saw him make some really nice plays and really clutch moments. I thought that was a breakout game for him, that if they win it, we're talking a lot more about it. Smile Munden looked as good as he's looked since he's been back from the foot, and I think that's big to have a veteran like Smile back there, playing much, much closer to full speed. He's a really good linebacker, and, had that foot not slowed him down, he could have made a difference in the SEC title game last year. And then in Lovett, I mean, he was just out there fighting. I mean, you just saw some guys emerge. I felt like, even though they were losing, there were some guys that just emerged and fought. And to me, that's really hot, because those are the guys that are going to help Georgia carry the fight as they try to get back on track.
Yeah, one of those two for me was Lawson Lucky. I would love to see more of him moving forward. I think, does he move? I know he's probably not the blocker that Oscar Delp is, but could he be tight end one moving forward? He's been so good this year. All right, we're going to do hot. We got to do cold. Who's cold this week, Mike?
Well, Auburn's coming in, right? What do they call it? A freeze warning? I mean, such a bad cliche, but the fact is Hugh Freeze has given some elite coaches trouble before. He's beaten Kirby Smart. He's beaten Nick Saban. Now, it's been a minute, but we saw last year that he hasn't lost his fastball. Cody, you brought up the stat. I mean, the quarterback ran for almost 100 yards. I think Auburn went for over 200 on the ground, and we weren't used to seeing that. I think this Georgia front is going to be more prepared, but still, Hugh Freeze, a guy right now that probably realizes that he's got to show some sort of momentum or promise to keep those boosters in that NIL engaged.
All right, for me, who's cold is being on the road. I'm so tired of away games. We're in October. We've only played one home game. It's going to be great to be back at Sanford Stadium this week.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Sanford Stadium, one of the best game day environments, and they keep doing more and more to the stadium to enhance the experience. So I know Georgia fans are going to be ready to see Auburn in Sanford Stadium, a familiar stadium, probably a familiar result as well.
Yeah, we'll get the 3:30 kick. Love the sunset that we'll start to get, in the second half. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. Any final thoughts as we kind of wrap? I think a lot of folks, Mike, were ready to burn it all down Saturday night, right? It did just really, especially after the first half, but really, really negative. But for me, you can find those specks of positivity there, and Georgia just got to move on and trust, like you've said, things go a little bit one way. Kirby Smart's a genius, and Kalen DeBoer should be fired, right? But I think everybody, the overreactions are huge from this weekend. We got to get back to a little bit of a more even keel.
Well, for sure, but predictable. I mean, they'd won 42 straight in the regular season and 28 straight in the SEC and 16. I mean, it's been a tremendous run, and it's not over, right? They've still won 42 out of the last 43 conference games. You played at Alabama on a night when Alabama played better. Sometimes the other guy just plays better, and Jalen Milroe was in a league of his own. You got to give him credit. You got to give DeBoer credit for having his team prepared. I thought DeBoer was very classy in victory and gave George a lot of credit for those fourth down conversions. A different feel to the game. I'm not saying Georgia fans don't want to beat Alabama any more than they wanted to before, but it's just a different feeling, I felt like, especially knowing how much more is left of the season and just how many traps are out there for these teams. Texas had a little bit on their hands with Mississippi State. I didn't expect to see that. And, let's find out what happens, for Vanderbilt and Alabama this weekend in Nashville. I'm not saying I think Vanderbilt's going to win, but can they keep it close? I mean, this league right now, Cody, there's just so much football left.
It's going to be a whole lot of fun to watch, and we will be with you every step of the way. Good stuff tonight, Mike. We will see you guys next week right here on The Beat.